Most buyers think finding the right house is the hardest part. I don't think that's true. I think the hardest part begins after you found the house, because that's when someone emails you more than 300 pages of disclosure and say, we need your offer tomorrow. Inspection reports, pest inspection, seller disclosure, natural hazard disclosure, roof inspection, permits, repair history. For many buyers, it's overwhelming. And honestly, I don't blame them. Not long ago, I was helping a buyer purchase a home here in the Bay Area. We had less than a day to review more than 300 pages of disclosures. If we want our offer to remain competitive, we will likely need to remove our inspection contingency. That's one of the biggest decisions a buyer can make. So how do you make that decision with confidence, without spending days reading every single page? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to walk you through how I approach that situation with my buyers, what we focused on, what we intentionally didn't spend much time on, and why they ultimately felt comfortable moving forward. Because reviewing disclosure isn't about reading every page. It's about understanding the story the home is telling. And stay with me until the end, because I'll share the biggest mistake I see buyers make after opening the disclosure package. It's something I see all the time, and avoiding it can completely change how confident you feel when it's time to write an offer. In case we haven't met, my name is Daryl Hahn, your real estate advisor here in Berkeley. I'm heading into my 20th year helping buyers and sellers accomplish their real estate goals with confidence throughout Berkeley and the East Bay. If you enjoy practical conversation like this about buying and selling real estate, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into it. One of my favorite parts of helping buyers actually happen before we even write an offer. It's reviewing disclosure together. Now, I know that probably sounds strange. Most people don't get excited about reading reports, but I do, because I have found that often where buyers stop feeling nervous and start feeling confident. Not because we discover a perfect home, but because we gain a much clearer understanding of what we are actually buying. And that's exactly what happened in a recent transaction I'm still working on today. Recently, I was helping buyers purchasing a home in Fremont. After searching for quite some time, we finally found one they really liked. The location worked, the layout worked, the price makes sense. We decided we want to write an offer, but there was one challenge. The sellers want offer quickly, and because of the way we will structure our offer, if we want to stay competitive, we will likely need to remove our inspection contingency. That's a big decision, especially when you're looking at more than 300 pages of disclosure. Naturally, my buyers look at me and ask, Derek, how are we supposed to review all of this in one day? Honestly, it's a great question, because the answer isn't to read every page equally. Instead, we started by asking a much simpler question. What story is this home trying to tell us? Little by little, we started building that story. We reviewed the home inspection report, the pest report, the transfer disclosure statement, the seller property questionnaire, the agent visual inspection disclosure. We reviewed the list of improvements the seller had complete before the sale. Slowly, picture of the home started coming together. Did we find issues? Absolutely. Like almost every home, there were deferred maintenance items. There were things my buyers know they eventually want to improve after they became the owners. But here's what changed. The more we understood the home, the less uncertain they felt. And that's what gave them the confidence to move forward. Not because the house was perfect, but because they understood it. By the time we finished reviewing the disclosure, my buyers weren't asking, is this house perfect? They were asking, knowing everything we know now, are we still comfortable moving forward? The answer was yes. As I was filming this video, we're still in escrow. That experience reminded me of something I think every buyer should understand. Disclosure aren't those that scare you. They're there to help you make a confident decision. So today, I'd like to show you the exact framework we use, because it's the same process I use for nearly every buyer I work with. First thing I do when reviewing disclosures is something that surprises a lot of buyers. I don't immediately start reading every page. Instead, I try to understand the story of the home. Think about the buyers I mentioned earlier. They have more than 300 pages sitting in front of them. If we try to give every page the same amount of attention, we'll still be reading by dinner. So instead, we zoom out. How old is the home? Has it been remodeled? Has it been well maintained? Has the seller lived there for a long time? Or was it recently renovated? Were improvements made over the years? Or all at once? Those questions help me understand the home before I start evaluating individual details. Because every home tells a story. Some homes tell the story of owners who carefully maintained the property for decades. Others tell the story of extensive remodeling. And some show deferred maintenance that accumulate over time. None of those stories automatically mean buy or don't buy. They simply help me understand what I'm looking at. Here's what I have learned. If you don't understand the story of the home, it's very easy to get lost in the paperwork. But once you understand the story, the details begin to make much more sense. That's exactly what happened with my Fremont buyers. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, they finally felt like they understood the home they were considering. Thinking about relocating to the Bay Area? Well, I got just the thing for you. I'm actually taking the time to create the ultimate relocation guide, which is meant to save you hours of research. And I have linked it down below. From top employers to the best hospitals, the top rated schools, and a boatload of other things that you need to know before you make the move. The best part of this guide is 100% free. That's right, you heard it. It's 100% free. Hope that helps. Once I understand the overall story of the home, the next step is deciding where we should spend most of our attention. Because here's the thing many buyers don't realize. Not every document in the disclosure package carries the same weight. With my Fremont buyers, we didn't start on page 1 and simply read all the way through page 300. That wouldn't have been the best use of our time. Instead, we focus on the documents that usually tells us the most about the property. The home inspection report, the pest inspection report, the transfer disclosure statement or TDS, the seller property questionnaire, commonly called the SPQ, the agent visual inspection disclosure or the AVID, and if available, specialty report like the roof, sewer lateral, foundation, or chimney inspection. Each document answers a different question. The inspection report helps us understand the physical condition of the home. The TDS tells us what the sellers know about the property and any issue they require to disclose. The SPQ often provides an additional background about repairs, improvement, insurance claim, neighborhood matters, or other information buyers should know. The AVID shows what the listing agent personally observed while walking through the property. When you put those documents together, they begin to tell one consistent story. And that's exactly what happened with my Fremont buyer. Instead of feeling like they were reading hundreds of unrelated pages, they started seeing how the pieces fit together. They weren't memorizing reports. They were understanding the home. Here's what I have learned. Most buyers become overwhelmed because they assume every page deserves the same level of attention. I don't believe that's true. Some documents tell you the story. Others provide supporting details. Once you know which document deserves your attention first, reviewing disclosure becomes far less intimidating. And instead of asking, how am I ever going to read all of this? Buyers start asking a much better question. Do I understand this home well enough to make a confident decision? This might be the biggest mindset shift in today's video. When I'm reviewing disclosure, I'm not looking for a perfect house, especially here in the East Bay. Many of the homes we buy are several decades old. Some are over 100 years old. If I expect every disclosure package to describe a perfect home, my buyers will never buy anything. Every home has imperfection. The question isn't whether there are issues. The question is whether those issues tell a consistent story. That's why I always tell my buyers, don't focus on finding isolated problems. Focus on identifying patterns. For example, if the imperfection report mentions a small concrete crack, that doesn't automatically concern me. If the past inspector recommends some routine repairs, that's fairly common too. Or maybe the seller mentions a few maintenance items they'd be meaning to address. By themselves, those aren't necessarily red flags. But what gets my attention is when multiple reports keep pointing to the same issue. Maybe the home inspector mentioned drainage concerns. Then the seller disclosure referenced previous water intrusion. Then another report recommends improving drainage around the foundation. Now, I'm not looking for 3 separate observations. I'm looking at one consistent pattern, and that's worth a much deeper conversation. This is exactly what happened with my Fremont buyers. As we walked through the disclosure, we absolutely found deferred maintenance. Like almost every home, there were things they knew they would eventually want to improve. But here's what we didn't find. We didn't find multiple reports pointing toward the same major concerns. The disclosure painted a fairly consistent picture. The home had been well cared for overall. It wasn't perfect, like it needs a new furnace, probably needs a new water heater soon. But nothing suggests there were hidden problems waiting to surprise them after closing. That gave my buyers a completely different level of confidence. Here's what I have learned. One issue rarely concerns me. A pattern deserves my attention. And that's a distinction I think every buyer should understand. Because the goal isn't to eliminate every imperfection. The goal is to understand whether the disclosure tells one honest, consistent story about the home. When they do, buyers usually feel much more calmer moving forward. And that's exactly what happened with my Fremont buyers. Instead of worrying about every individual repair, they understood the overall condition of the property. And once they understood the story, making the decision became much easier. After we review the important reports, talk through the inspection finding, and answer the question that matter most, there's one final question I always ask my buyers before we talk about writing an offer. It's actually a very simple question, but over the years, I have found it more often bring complete clarity. I ask, knowing everything you know now, would you still choose this home? Notice what I'm asking. I'm not asking if this house is perfect, because no house is. I'm not asking will you ever have to spend money for repairs, because every homeowner eventually will. And I'm definitely not asking are there any issues, because if you've been paying attention to this video, you already know every home has issues. Instead, I'm asking something much more important. Has anything we learned changed the way you feel about buying this home? That's a very different question, because by this point, the prices are gone. The inspection reports have been reviewed. The seller disclosures have been discussed. The questions have been answered. Now the decision becomes much simpler. Do you still feel comfortable moving forward? That's exactly where my Fremont buyers found themselves. By the time we finished reviewing the disclosure, they understood the deferred maintenance. They understood the condition of the roof. They understood the repair they likely want to make after they became the owner. Nothing was being hidden from them. Nothing was catching them by surprise. So instead of asking, can you live with these issues? They start asking, knowing everything we know today, do we still believe this is the right home for us? And the answer was yes. Not because the home has suddenly become perfect, but because they understood exactly what they were buying. That understanding gave them the confidence to move forward. Here's what I learned. Confidence doesn't come from finding a perfect disclosure package. Confidence comes from removing uncertainty. When buyers understand the home's strength, its imperfections, and the responsibility that come with ownership, they make calmer decisions. And in my experience, those are usually the decisions they continue feeling good about years after the closing. The fifth and final lesson is really the reason I wanted to make this video. When my Fremont buyers first opened the disclosure package, they saw over 300 pages. At first, it felt overwhelming. Like many buyers, their first reaction was, how are we ever going to get through all of this? But something interesting happened as we worked through it together, page by page, report by report. The uncertainty slowly started disappearing. Not because we discovered a perfect house. We didn't. Like almost every home, there were deferred maintenance items. There were repairs they knew they would eventually want to make. There were things they planned to improve after they became the owners. But here's what changed. Those items were no longer unknown. They became expectations, and expectations are much easier to plan for than surprises. By the end of our review, my buyers weren't asking, what if something wrong with the house? Instead, they were asking, we understand the house now. Are we still excited about owning it? That's a completely different conversation. It wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. They understood the condition of the home. They understood what had already been improved. They understood what they might need to budget for future. Most importantly, they understood the responsibility that came with becoming homeowners. That understanding gave them the confidence to move forward. They removed their inspection contingency. We negotiated a price they felt good about. And today, we're still moving forward a successful closing. Not because the home was flawless, but because they understood exactly what they were buying. Here's what I have learned. The purpose of reviewing disclosure isn't to eliminate uncertainty. That's impossible. Every home, whether it's 5 years old or 100 years old, will have something that needs attention. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is understanding, because buyers don't gain confidence by finding a perfect inspection report. They gain confidence by understanding the home's strength, its imperfection, and whether those imperfections find their comfort level. When that happens, buyers stop making decisions based on fears. They start making decisions based on knowledge. And in my experience, those are usually the buyers who continue feeling good about their purchase long after closing day. If you step back and look at everything we talked about today, you probably notice a common pattern. None of the 5 steps were really about reading paperwork. They were about reducing uncertainty. First, we took a step back and tried to understand the overall story of the home, not just the inspection findings, but the history of the property and how it had been cared for over the years. Then we focus on the reports that matter most. Instead of trying to give all 300 pages the same amount of attention, from there we look at patterns instead of isolated problems. Because one issue by itself rarely tells the whole story. Patterns do. Then we ask what I believe is the most important question every buyer should ask before writing an offer. Knowing everything we know now, would you still choose this home? And in the end, all of those steps led to one thing: confidence. That's exactly what happened with my Fremont buyers. The more they understood the home, the less overwhelming those 300 pages became. Because the disclosure packages aren't really about paperwork. They are about helping buyers replace uncertainty with understanding before making one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. If you remember only one thing from today's video, I hope it's this. The purpose of reviewing disclosure isn't to find reason to walk away. It's to understand the home well enough to decide whether it's the right one for you. That's a very important difference. After helping buyers in nearly 20 years, I found that the buyers who feel the best after closing aren't the one who bought the perfect house. They're the one who understood exactly what they were buying before they make the commitment. Because every home comes with responsibilities. Every homeowner will eventually replace something, repair something, maintain something. That's simply part of owning a home. The key isn't avoiding those responsibilities. The key is knowing what they are before they become homeowners. When buyers understand that, they start making decisions based on fear. They start making decisions based on knowledge. And to me, that's what confidence really looks like. People are sometimes surprised when I tell them one of my favorite parts of helping buyers is actually reviewing disclosure together. It's probably not the most exciting part of buying a home. Most people would probably say touring homes or negotiating offer is more exciting. And I understand that. But over the years, I have realized this is often the moment that changes everything. It's where buyers stop imagining what life might be like in the home and start understanding what it will actually be like to own it. It's where excitement becomes balanced with information. It's where questions get answers, concerns get discussed, and buyers begin seeing the home with much greater clarity. To me, that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job. Not simply helping someone buy a house, but helping them make a decision they'll still feel good about years after they move in. Because that's the kind of guidance I would want if I were buying a home myself. If you've been following this series, you'll probably notice that every video builds on the previous one. In the last video, we talked about why similar homes in Berkeley can have very different results. Today, we talked about what happened after you actually find a home you like. Because finding the right home is really just the beginning. The next step is understanding it. That's where disclosures become so valuable. Not because they're exciting to read, but because they give buyers the information they need to move forward with confidence. In the next video, we're going to continue building on the idea. I'm going to share why sometimes tell buyers don't write the offer. Not because the house is necessarily bad, but because sometimes the smartest decision isn't moving forward. Sometimes it's having the confidence to walk away. And I have shared several real examples of when I've given that advice. If today's video helped make disclosure package feel a little less overwhelming, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you're thinking about buying a home in Berkeley or anywhere throughout the East Bay, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Every week, I share practical advice based on nearly 20 years of helping buyers and sellers make confident real estate decisions. I would also love to hear from you. If you have purchased a home before, what was the most confusing part of reviewing disclosure? Or if you're planning to buy, what question do you still have? Leave me a comment below. I read everyone, and many of your questions inspire future videos. And remember, the goal isn't to find the perfect house. The goal is to understand the house well enough to know whether it's the right one for you. Every home has its story. Before you become the owner, take the time to understand that story. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Darren Han, and I'll see you in the next video.